Welcome to season 2 of the Broken Open podcast. I'm Maureen Towns, author, speaker, expert on finding calm amidst chaos of helping those that you love with mental health and addictions issues. If you like what you hear on this podcast, be sure to subscribe so that you're the first to know when new episodes are released. And visit MaureenTowns.com to get in touch, stay current on our programs, Footsteps for Families and Freedom from Intergenerational Trauma, as well as updates on the book, which has just been released called Broken Open. I hope you enjoy the show. Hi, Leona. How are you?
Hi, Maureen. I'm well. How are you?
I'm great because the sun is shining, the birds are chirping, all is well in my world.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So thanks for coming on the podcast. Are you ready to just dive right in?
I can't wait.
Oh my God, let's just do it. Let's just do it. So, Leona, let's start with the broken open question. And then I'll ask you after that to tell me your story. Sound good?
Yes.
Okay. So the broken open question is, tell me about a time in your life when you experienced something that in that moment felt catastrophic. It felt like the end of the world, but in hindsight has proven to be a real gift to you. I know you've got lots.
I'm going to start with this one, and one would never say that losing a mother at a young age would be a gift. But my mom died of a condition that we found out later after her death was a genetic condition that myself, my brother, and his 2 kids and my son inherited. And so she died when she was 49 and I was 22. And it was devastating.
Mm.
At the time, I did not really have the capacity to move through the grief. I had a newborn, shockingly, at 22 and just continued on. But I see now the capacity that I have for empathy and for holding space for people in grief that I don't know. No, I'm 99% sure you couldn't learn in a book.
Mhm.
And it has made me more compassionate. It has, again, like I said, that holding that space for empathy and holding that space for pain for people that, so I call it like a 4% gift. I still wish I had a mom. It was hard to navigate adulthood without one. And she was lovely, but there is something that I have learned from that experience that has really changed who I became. I, as a result, have a very small part of my practice, but a very vibrant part of my practice working with people who have this same genetic disorder. And it's been a blessing to be able to be front lines with them and be able to, as much as one can, understand their situation.
That's amazing. And I really appreciate what you're saying about, it's a 4% gift. You really wish your mom was around, but you're so grateful for what you learned about who you are and what you're capable of.
Exactly. And I look at where I ended up, and as much as I would have loved to have her support, and not everybody has a mom that they connect with. She was lovely. But I see that there are doors that have been opened for me and opportunities that would not be here if she was here. And so I take those as those small gifts. And it creates that, that place of meaning and purpose that otherwise would not be here. And I think no matter what happens, again, it may be only the 4% good, but we want to notice whatever we define as our 4% good. Otherwise, nothing matters anymore, right? There is no good in anything.
And you are a specialist in that. Yeah. So you mentioned that you were 22 when your mom passed away. And so, and you said that I didn't have the capacity to move through that at the time. So what got you there? What got you to the place where you had the capacity to move through it?
My other broken up in moments, devastating divorce, completely unexpected to have my marriage fall apart after close to 20 years. I was blindsided by that, but some of the grief that I was experiencing there, I started to notice that there was an extra, Brene Brown uses, and it's not, it may not be Brene Brown's work, but she mentions it in her work, that when we feel lost, longing, or loss, that's when we know we're in grief, because sometimes it's hard to identify emotions, and grief is so intense and all consuming. It's really hard to like find a framework to go, oh, I'm in grief. And most of us are just like, I feel terrible. I don't ever want to feel like this. It's like nausea. Please just let this be done. And so I started to notice it bubble up then, but even in the last few years, I've experienced some chronic pain and emotions that are not dealt with never become benign. We start to notice either we offload them in other ways. It can contribute to mental illness, addiction, as you know. And for me, I thought I was doing well and started to have chronic pain. And so I have a biological issue that definitely contributes to chronic pain, but I also started to explore the possibility that there may be some less than benign emotions that I hadn't dealt with. And working with a trauma therapist, there was indeed a large well of grief that I have been working through. One of my greatest tools, I mean, I work with a coach, I work with a therapist, but I also journal a lot. And it has been very helpful because you can't talk to your therapist every day. And if you can, you have way more money than I have. And so it's been such a gift to have tools of self-care and self-exploration in order to move through that. So even in the last couple of weeks, I've, dove a little deeper, writing a letter to my mom, and even noticing what comes up there. So being able to explore those emotions and move through them, even though it's been like, I'm 51, I don't do math, but it's been a long time. Being able to see that those emotions are always worth exploring if we get a bit of a trigger or sometimes a little nuzzle that they might be there. And for me, I've like I said, going through a divorce, I started to notice there was a deep well of deeper pain, and it started to bring up an ache for my mom that I didn't know was there. And then just recently, in the last few years with this chronic pain, that I thought, okay, we are all connected, right? Mind, body, spirit, and the permission to go, oh man, am I not past this?
Yeah.
Maybe not. Let's see. Yeah.
Isn't that the truth? And I find this with clients, and you probably do too. And in me, especially too, I'm always amazed. Like, am I still dealing with this problem? Is this really still here? And it's just layers and layers and layers. And you go a little bit deeper each time.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you told me 20 years ago that everything was connected, I would have gone,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But man, it really is wild.
Very.
And that if you can't deal with your emotions over here, they'll show up over here.
Absolutely. Or they discharge into relationships or eating or something. And you're like, what? And I think it's that gentle curiosity or that compassionate curiosity to think, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm just a human who is evolving like everyone else. So we don't want to pathologize that pain. It just is, right? We all have stories and trauma and different things that have happened to us and impacted us differently. And just that permission to explore is so valuable.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I also, talk to a lot of people about be kind to yourself. I know that you have a coping strategy that you don't like.
Yes.
Like eating or whatever it might be. But, and I say it's not the eating that's the problem. It might be a problem, but it's not the problem. And the way that you contribute to the problem is by shaming yourself for the way that you're coping right now. It's okay. And so you mentioned compassion, and I think I sat up like this when you said it, because it's something that I've been really, working on in me, especially right now. You must be noticing during pandemic, all kinds of weird things are surfacing for people.
Totally.
Things that they've not dealt with before that maybe now are showing up in different ways.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what is one of the things that, you've noticed about you or someone else during pandemic? Like, so if someone's having an issue, how would you suggest they approach it? Like maybe they're having, I'll give you, for instance, just to
Okay.
help you out. Okay, I'll use me. Okay,
Yeah.
this is free therapy.
Yeah.
um, I noticed during quarantine, like, I'm like, okay, so 12 months I can exercise and eat well. 13 months, not so much.
No.
14 months, forget it. And
Yeah.
15 months, I am Cadbury's biggest supporter.
Yeah.
So what's going on? Now
Yeah.
I figured it out, but how would you,
Yeah. Yeah.
how would you talk
I
to
think
someone?
it's that what I've noticed, and so I'm trained in Brene Brown's work. I do a lot of work around shame resilience and corporately and personally in my coaching practice, and I use it on myself
Mhm,
because integrity says, please don't bring anything to other people that we're not, integrating into our own lives. And
mhm,
and what I feel like it is like chronic vulnerability, right? So vulnerability is uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure, and we are like navigating this nonstop.
mhm,
And some people go, yeah, but for the most part, I've worked from home before this, or, they don't give themselves permission to notice some of the changes that have happened.
mhm.
And even you think you go to the grocery store and you're like, do I have my mask? Did I use hand sanitizer? Did they sanitize the cart? Did that person just cough? Oh my goodness, my nose is running. I don't have COVID, but my nose runs in Canada when you go from cold to hot or hot to cold or whatever it is. And you're like, I can't even rub my nose. And so that chronic level of vulnerability is really hard on brains.
Yes.
Brains love certainty. Brains do not love risk. Even if you're the kind of person that, normally on a beautiful spring Sunday, you throw yourself out of a plane with all the safety mechanisms and a guy on your back. It does not love that chronic state of vulnerability. And so after a while, the brain itself is trying to navigate it. And so with that lack of certainty, we lose some of those natural resilience resources. And so for you, eating, exercising, self-care, we got this nailed. After a while, it's not your fault. Your
Mhm.
brain is just like, okay, Maureen, sorry, but like there's a lot of chronic stress that you're navigating like a champ. Like you're not thinking of this, but it is stressful on our nervous system. It's really stressful on our brain. And then what ends up happening is our limbic system, which is our, lizard, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, is chronically on overdrive, and we're not able to access that strategic part of our brain
Mhm.
where we make great decisions like, you know what, I'm not going to eat a Cadbury egg for breakfast. I'm going to eat a yay egg with an actual yolk that doesn't taste quite delicious, but salt and pepper go well with it. And so it's that chronic state of vulnerability, and I'm seeing that in people I work with in organizations. I'm seeing that in my personal clients. But even having that platform, they're like, oh, and there's no shame in it. It's
Right.
a tired brain.
Yes.
It's like feet that are tired walking 15,000 steps. We don't go, feet, you suck. We just go,
Mhm.
oh, maybe we should put you up and, rub a little cream on you tonight or put you in a nice little bath. And so that's the other piece, is to not shame ourselves, because shame is where we think we're not enough,
Mhm.
or who do you think you are? This would sounds a little bit more like you're not enough, right? Like, who are you to be eating these Easter, whatever, Cadbury, investing in them in a very tactile way. And so that's where that compassion comes in. Because if we
Yes.
want to get that, sorry, part of my background is in neuroscience. So if we want to get that strategic part of our brain that really works for us, bolsters resilience, helps us make good decisions, self-compassion is one of the ways that we can switch off that lizard reactive part of our brain and come back to that nourishing part of our brain. Because when we say something kind to ourselves, it can be very simple, like, wow, this is hard, Maureen.
Yeah.
Your brain loves to hear your name, number one, because basically we're just all little puppies as a mammal. And the other thing is that it can't tell whether that voice is from an outside source or an inside source. So because we are mammals and nurtured by a caregiver, it just thinks we have a caregiver that's being nice to us. So it's like, oh, that's great. And so brains are infinitely complicated and super simple.
Yeah.
And so those are some ways to just go, oh, that's why. Yeah, there is a lot of uncertainty. When am I going to like get out of the house? Can I
Mhm.
have people on my deck? Can I not have people on my deck? Do we have to be 6 feet apart? It's just like, bananas. So our brains get tired. And one of the ways is, number one, recognize it, try not to get into shame. And either way, compassion brings us, is one of the tools we can come back online and just be gentle and kind with ourselves.
That's beautifully said. And thank you for that. And yeah, I agree with you. I came to the conclusion, like I'm in a heightened stress response, have been for a long time. I'm out of energy. My threshold for making good decisions is very, very low. I need to fill my bucket. One of the ways that I'll do that is not shaming myself for eating the chocolate bar.
Totally.
And I decided that the extra 10 to 15 pounds is adorable. So
I love it. It's how you're healthy, right? It's just like, how do we, because then that brings us into other shame. What's society saying about this? And it's like, am I healthy? Yeah, I'm healthy, right? Can I walk through the grocery store? Yes, I can.
My muffin top, which is peeking out over my pants, is really cute. Look at it. Look at it.
There you go.
Yeah, that's what
love that. I love that. And even that reframe, what I hear you're saying, makes a difference, right? Like we all have things. And so even just going, if we're talking body image, legs, like, thank you. You were moving right now. They're great. My femur has not snapped off during this podcast. Like, that's a blessing. I have skin that fully covers it. There are people that have skin conditions, been burnt, whatever have you. I just think reminding ourselves of the truth and not the trigger, right? Those things are triggers, and then coming back to what is our truth.
And it's an old voice in my head that says, you should, like, be kind, Maureen, be kind. Oh, and I didn't know that about the brain, that it likes to hear our own voice, but I love that.
It can't tell the difference. It literally most of the time just thinks it's a loving caregiver, and it cannot tell outside voices from inside voices. So so if we switch that over, when you're saying Maureen or Leona does a lot of shoulding is always a really good indication that we have some shame. Self-compassion is one of the ways that we mitigate the shame, according to research. Permission is another way. I give myself permission to enjoy the food that I choose to eat, right? Just like it's like grace. But brains can't tell inside source or outside source. So you can also see the flip side. If I'm beating myself up all day, I am in like an abusive relationship with myself, because I would never say to you, Maureen, don't eat the chocolate. Who the hell do you think you are? But I say it to me all the time. And so our brains can't differentiate. So being in that chronic abuse also is really hard, because we go back to the lizard brain. And so self-compassion brings us home. And again, the brain is so simple in that regard. Again, it just thinks, oh, somebody loves me. Thank you so much. And even that's why it picks up on your name more quickly. Because again, it's just like that really primitive part of your brain that's like, oh, she even remembered my name. You're like, so I've known you for a long time. So it's really, really good. And that's part of how even positive affirmations do work, because after a while you form a new neural pathway that says, oh, this is my body positive neural pathway. Yeah, I have a good body. It works really well. I'm not starving. I'm solid. I take up some space. Good for me. And so it forms a new groove in our brain when we remind ourselves. So we form a self-compassion groove in our brain instead of a self-abuse. We form another little, and so as soon as you even say something kind to yourself or an affirmation, then those neural pathways become stronger, like a trough in your brain, and the water, which is your nourishing self-talk, just starts to go into those and starts to change the synapses that used to be in those negative parts. So it's like Cadbury for your brain.
It's amazing how malleable our neural pathways are.
Yes. And they never lose that malleability. So there was this, saying, and we applied it to all things, that old dogs can't learn new tricks. That is not shown anywhere in neuroscience. That's absolutely not true. We have people who have even brains that are declining. They would be diagnosed with a form of dementia. And even them, when even simple things like nurturing a plant
Mm,
or being exposed to music, you'll start to notice different parts of their brain fire,
mm,
and that they can even start to regain a bit more memory or be functioning in a higher mental capacity. So our
mm.
brains are like juicy miracles.
Amazing. And so some of the things that I find in me and some of the people that I work with is that there's a little fear voice that tends to pop in. You say, be kind to yourself, Maureen. Go ahead and eat the chocolate. Don't shame yourself. Be
Yeah,
compassionate.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's good. But there's a little voice that says, but if you let your guard down too much, you're not doing okay.
Mhm,
Don't become too complacent because that's
mhm,
not cool. You're going to become,
mhm,
and then I'm like, oh. And then I have to remind myself, okay, wait a second. That old fear voice, where is that
mhm,
coming from? Whose voice is
mhm,
that really?
mhm.
And how do you advise people on how to let that go?
Ooh, I love this question so much. I do a weekly show called Love at Lunch where I like open up my toolbox, and it's on Facebook and Instagram. And we just talked about this. So this is like, whoa, our
Yeah,
brains meeting.
yeah.
And so there's a number of ways. In coaching, we get trained. It's like a saboteur or a gremlin. And
Mhm,
so number one, recognizing those voices. In Brene's work, she would talk about like a shame message that often comes
mhm,
in, and they're quite similar
mhm.
often. And internal family systems therapy talks about like parts of us. And so when we think of families, we think of like, my sister and my brother and my mom and, whoever else and the dog. But this is like internal parts of us.
Yeah.
And so it's really valuable to notice, oh, is this just sit back, be curious, maybe, lather yourself with a little compassion and get curious about that voice, because that voice probably shows up in different times and in quite similar messages.
Yes.
And it usually comes from our childhood. So
Yes.
without being a therapist, we don't need to get into like the deep, deep part, but it usually serves a purpose, right?
Mhm.
Either it kept us safe in really high stress.
Yes.
And so I've taken it kind of a little further. And in my coaching practice, I actually have people like an IFS, internal family systems, they also would name them, but I actually have them name them and draw a picture or take a picture out of a magazine and describe that person. So
Okay.
this is vulnerable, but I have a girl that I call the crossing guard girl. She is a Jedi rule follower, and she will tell you how to follow the rules.
Yes.
She's about 9. She
Mm,
served me super well when my mom was sick and I was left alone with my dad.
mm,
Um, and so I took on some things there. If you follow the rules, then people don't like do inappropriate things with you.
mm,
And I can help you stay safe too. So
mm,
if you want to know how to stay safe, then I am your girl.
mhm,
However, she doesn't always serve me
mm.
because there's no grace there. She's really mean to herself.
Yeah.
And so I have a picture of Crossing Guard Girl. My husband knows who Crossing Guard Girl is. And so that I even encourage, and this is a part of a coach training, is that we just, with people that you are safe with, that you can just say, oh, hey, I have this crossing guard girl.
Yeah.
She's 9. If things get dangerous and you notice somebody come out that is the most ridiculous rule follower on the planet, Leona is not in the building. We have crossing guard girl. She is blonde and cute, and she's dressed in a triangle because that's how Leona draws to this day. But she will keep you safe, but she's not integrated into me. And
Mm,
so she has a lot of rules about Cadbury chocolate. And
mhm,
so I know her feeling, I know her little stop sign. And so that's one of the things I use in my coaching practice,
mhm,
is to help people identify, how did they serve you? They were trying to be a
mm,
protector to you when you probably felt vulnerable. And when you feel triggered now, or you have some sort of stimulus or a cue, we can call it, if those other words are also too triggering. When you have a cue or stimulus, sometimes they come out. Recognize even what they feel like in your body,
yeah.
know what they feel like. What are their messages? Oh, Maureen, you're going to go off the deep end. Yeah.
Mhm.
Leona, not even one. Look at you. Bad
Yeah.
girl. And so recognizing the feeling, the voice, giving them a little love. Oh, hi, crossing guard girl. I must feel super vulnerable. I must be in a grocery store with not a clean card in sight. And you're
Mhm.
like ready to like, yeah, manage the safety for Sobeys. Then I know, oh, honey, you're feeling vulnerable.
Mm.
Right. I'm feeling vulnerable, and come back to the truth of who Leona is, who's wiser and integrated.
Mhm.
But that's one of the things that I use. It's just, oh, it's a part. I must be feeling triggered. How can I
Mhm.
come back to my center?
Mhm.
But spending some time with those parts and compassionately
Mhm.
observing them, they served us well. They may have kept us very safe, but now they can be sabotaging us because they can really come with a lot of shame and
Mhm.
shoulds.
Mhm.
And so being able to recognize the finger wagging is our first kind of invitation, and be curious and not critical.
What a lovely tool that is. Like, that's so sweet.
So my
That's
clients like send me pictures of their people, but then they know them, right? And
yeah.
our brains really love to understand. So if we can get it out, and whether you draw it or just like write a letter to it, something tangible, our
Yes.
brain already cuts a little bit of the tie to it, goes, oh, I know crossing guard
Yeah.
girl. And all of a sudden, I know crossing guard girl, whether I drew a picture or journaled or wrote 5 characteristics about crossing guard girl, it doesn't really matter, but something, we heal through something creative, and creative does not mean what we would define as art.
I understand.
Crossing guard girl is not on my fridge.
Yeah, don't give me pipe cleaners and glue.
Yeah.
Please don't.
Okay.
Please don't. But I hear what you're saying. It's such a loving way to approach that little girl in you, right?
Yeah,
Who was taught that this is what you need to do to stay safe.
totally.
Now, I do it a little bit differently, but I love your toolkit. I do. That's such a sweet way to do it. But I have people go back and basically reparent themselves, the part
Right.
of themselves that, that they left behind because there was no room for that, in their
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
And so they get to go back and reparent themselves the way they
I
needed.
love that.
It's
I
very,
love
very
that. Yeah.
similar. And they do use
Yeah.
pictures like that, but
Oh,
it's
that's so great.
yeah,
Yeah.
because we do
Yeah.
splinter off parts of ourselves, as Gabor Mate says,
Totally.
right? Like we leave parts of ourselves behind that, that
Yeah.
there's no room for that.
Yeah. Or you start to hate, so you don't like the finger wagging, but you
Mhm.
also don't like how this example shows up in relationships, right?
Yep.
Because when I feel super stressed, then I start to overfunction. Like in anxious systems, we like overfunction or underfunction. So overfunctioners can be bossy, demanding, not super strategic.
Yes.
They can plan like, an escape route, but you probably won't play a role if you're on their team because they are just tunnel vision. And
Oh
so
my.
in relationships, it can be tough too, because Rule Girl could come out. She's not super fun to be in love with, let me tell you, because she's telling you how to put your pants on and you're 48. You're like, so sorry, which then leads to more shame because you don't love that part of you. But if you go, oh, hi, oh, hi, you
Yeah.
must be feeling stressed. Here,
Yeah.
here
That
you
kind of,
are. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And then love yourself back. It served a tremendous purpose. And I love that lens, because it's not pathological,
Yeah, that's
right?
right.
It's just like, oh, honey, that
Yeah.
served you so well. It
Yeah.
helps you manage a super stressful situation that was not appropriate for you to manage at that time, whether it was like inflicted on you purposely or just something happened in your
Oh, for
family
sure.
or
You
in
can
your
have the
life.
best
Yeah,
family of
totally.
origin and still have it.
Totally. And you would still have issues.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have yet to meet anybody. If you do,
Yeah.
yeah, tell me.
I know one
Hey,
person that I'm sure
yeah,
she must have issues somewhere, but she
yeah,
had an
she does.
uncomplicated childhood. I'm like, how did that happen?
Exactly.
So, this is so good. So, I don't know much about your story. How did you come to be 51 and call yourself, um, a bringer of joy? How did you get here?
So I was just writing a blog. I just wrote a book called Finding Your Joy Spot. So it's a bit tongue in cheek, but it is because I work with a lot of people who have like this real guilt thing, and I call that it's a little bit sassy, like their G spot, because
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just
yeah.
like, leave that guilt behind. And then there's lots of like scientific ways to do that. Brené's work really supports that, because I would say most of us, we think is guilt is actually shame. Like I'm
Mhm.
flawed, not I did something,
Mhm.
that was wrong. It's I am intrinsically flawed. And so we hide, we hedge, we don't bring our magic to the world. And so 11 years ago, well, it started before that, some things started to erode in my marriage, totally unbeknownst to me. I thought we had a great marriage, and I found out 5 days later it was not going well.
Yeah.
And stayed together for a long time. And before that, I was just busy, right? I had 3 kids.
Yeah.
I was just doing life. I would say I'd probably pretty numbed out, what I would call asleep. And moving through this, not a super emotional person. I was raised in a Dutch stoic, like you just move. And so I moved for a lot of my life, busy, busy, busy. And then as a result of what was happening in my marriage and the shock of it all and the betrayal, I spent a lot of time in my closet crying. So I talk about me coming out of the closet. I considered a lot of possibilities in there. The commonly used phrase
Yes.
of coming out of the closet, where will I end up? Open to anything at that point.
Yeah.
And a lot of days, I just was hoping I wouldn't wake up the next day, or something would just take me. And just before that, I had found out that I had inherited what my mom died of, was a genetic form of cancer that we did not know at the time, and found out that I had also passed it to my son. And I had found out I had some spinal tumors. So there was a lot of awful things going on. And so I coasted through life. I didn't tell a lot of people about what was happening in my marriage, cried a lot in my closet. But what I started to notice was that as I started to heal, the marriage ended. I was financially vulnerable. I was trying to find myself. I was in school at the time before this, but couldn't afford to be in school anymore, and rebuilding myself. Was that I started to experience this weird thing gurgling in my throat. I was taking coach training, and one day my kid said to me, I was going to training that day, and she said, how are you? And I said, I'm good, but I feel this weird feeling in my throat. And she's like, what do you mean? I said, like, I woke up with this gurgling in my throat. And she said, maybe it's joy, Mom, because you finally found out what you're actually supposed to be doing. And I was like, and she is a teenager, she is a lamb, but I was like, she's not, spouting off, prophetic wisdom as a profession. And I was like, I think it is joy. And I started to notice I never laughed out loud watching TV ever. Every picture in my photo album, I smiled like this.
Yes.
If I smiled without showing my teeth now, people would actually think that somebody was inhabiting my body. Yes, I am quite optimistic. But that wasn't who I was before I moved through the depth of pain. So you talk about, I know a tiny bit of your story. It was in the breaking open that I started to notice joy. And joy was not that I thought I had the best life ever. I was excited to have bought like all the groceries I needed for the next week. And sometimes that would make me cry. But that's why I called it finding your joy spots, because that may not bring somebody else joy, but it was the joy then in those moments that gave me the courage and the resilience to move. And I am a learner. I have a value around learning. And so I started to research, what is it about joy? And is it a thing? Because this is weird. And I started to notice it, not obviously just on the good days when I bought groceries and over little things, but my son later went on and had brain surgery. My dad died of a brain tumor, like within 6 months of that. But it was like those spots of joy. Even on the day of my son's surgery, my mom had passed away from the identical experience because it's genetic. That was our 23rd craniotomy in my immediate family. I'm not talking aunts and uncles. I'm talking just our people. And so it was really traumatic because there's all that stuff attached to it, right? But I noticed, like, probably even on the first day, it was like, I wrote a blog about it and it's in the book that I just wrote. And I was like, okay, that was so powerful what just happened there. It was like
Mhm.
these little savory, and I need to have like a better example, but like ET and Reese's Pieces, it started
Mhm.
to like form a pathway. Just, okay, there's a joy spot. I can
Mhm.
do that. And it brings us to the present, because I think often what happens during traumatic experiences is we say, why is this happening to us? Which is never helpful.
Hmm.
Great to explore with a therapist, but not great to explore the day of the brain surgery with a therapist. We just need to get through. And then the other thing we do is called future surfing, which is what if, like
Mhm.
what if, and I'm sure you know those what if
Mhm. I got
moments
lots of them, yeah.
so intensely. Um, and then, but joy brings us centered. It gives us exactly what we need in the moment. And it bolsters just a little bit of ignition to help us be in the present, be grounded in the truth is, and that grace that's there in that moment. And then it's almost like hope that bolsters us like forward from that.
Mm.
And so that's where I started to become a student of joy, because I thought there is something so nourishing, and it's not about having a perfect life. It's about noticing and nourishing those joy spots in our life that give us the hope and the resilience after studying it for over a decade, that
Mhm.
those same pieces are tied into resilience. And so over the time I was writing about joy, I was just like, I'm not sure. I know why I'm obsessed with joy, but I'm like, something a little more scientific sounding. Um, but it's really all tied into like there's 40 years of research on well-being and what some people call happiness. And I just joke that joy is easier to spell.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's how I became obsessed with joy, because I realized that if we are present, if we have the capacity to be grounded in a moment, and sometimes it's the joy that does the grounding, we can survive almost anything. And so I believe that we don't need to change anything in our life necessarily to experience more joy. We
Yes.
just need to be available. And so I teach people to be available. And once they start to find those more of those joy spots, to cultivate and nurture their capacity to experience joy. And then what we see really underneath that is all the tools of resilience. They're
Oh, it's
married.
perfect.
Yeah.
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 I love what you're saying. So you say, joy brings you to the present moment, and often, like you say, it works in reverse too. The
Yeah.
present moment brings me joy,
Yeah. And
because
then we
all the
can do
what
it,
ifs and
right?
the
Yeah.
why for, and
Yeah.
the what if and but,
Yeah.
and then I have to realize, oh yeah, but that's not happening right now. What's happening
Yes.
right now is that I'm sitting in this chair in this
Yeah.
lovely place,
Yeah.
speaking to a wonderful
Exactly.
woman, and everything is
And
great.
it's okay. And even if we were in the hospital and something isn't great,
Yes.
can I do this moment?
Yes.
And when we see like a gracious, a nurse that,
Mhm.
is thoughtful to someone we love, or we see, there's all these little moments. We take the moment to like, I'm a chocolate fanatic. Cadbury, you and me. So I'm just like, I savor this holy wafer of chocolate when I literally feel like I'm enduring hell. But I'm like,
Mm.
wow, this chocolate tastes amazing. That's a
Yeah.
joy spot. Okay, I
Yeah.
can do this with the help of chocolate.
Yeah.
Um, and then that it's almost like that little spark of energy goes, okay, you've got a bit of grace to
Yeah.
just lubricate and take things when things feel so gritty.
Yeah.
And so that's why I call them joy spots, because they're not, I think it would be too intense if it's like, constant, and that's not what I'm looking for. And those do bolster,
Yeah.
more optimism. They, tend to, again, talk about neuroscience, change some of that negativity bias that our brain has to look for danger all the time.
Mhm.
So you do start to notice it increase, and you might notice that set point for positivity may be raised by being more aware, but it's just such a blessing to know that even on the worst days, joy is there,
Mhm.
literally is just waiting for you to go, oh, hi, oh, there you are
Mhm.
behind this chair.
Yeah. And you
Yeah.
have an amazing broken open story. I mean, your story of, this thing happened, and then this thing happened, and then this thing happened, and then this thing happened. And it's like, oh my gosh, I've got to start dealing with what's
Yeah.
going on here. And in the process, you discover joy. And
Yeah, I'm still
I was
shocked.
similar that way, because I remember the promise that I was given, that Maureen, when you learn to feel these feelings that you've been running from for so long,
Yes.
you will experience joy in the same proportion to that.
Exactly. It is exactly right. If we numb the dark, or with a feel, there's nothing bad with any emotions, but let me just tell you, there's a few I don't love. If we
Unpleasant, I call
if
them,
we
yeah.
numb the dark, we
Mhm.
numb the light. I describe it kind of like a balloon that is inflated or starting to deflate. So I numbed a lot of the dark. I mean, for good reason. Again, we talk about that little kid just need to survive, and or busyness, whatever. So just, you numb it. But then when you either are forced to feel
Mhm.
or you give yourself permission to feel, you
Mhm.
increase the capacity for connection,
Mhm.
belonging, love, contentment, joy, hope. All these things were like, I didn't even know what this was possible. And
Mhm.
so that is and I don't want to be trite, but that is the opportunity in being broken open
Yeah.
to be able to go, is there a 4% gift here?
Mhm.
And then and then you can actually, science shows us how to savor. Rick Hansen talks about the HEAL acronym, where we actually elongate those feelings. So again, we increase our capacity for the feelings that we enjoy. And he uses a neat little trick where he links it back to hard places so that, again, we can integrate. And I just sort of it's like cultivating joy, right? So sometimes we have to dig into the crap of our lives to grow more of those flowers. There's nothing wrong with crap. We use it in our gardens all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
You're very witty.
cultivate the crap. Yeah.
Very funny.
Bring on the craft cultivation.
Yeah.
If I have a retreat called that, I'll let you know. Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with crap. That's a good
No.
one. So,
No.
God, I had a question. Well, one of the questions that comes to mind is, so you say it's not all the time. I don't do
No,
this.
it is not all the time. No.
So do you numb out? Do you mindlessly watch Netflix and play Sudoku at the same time? Do you do those things?
I noticed. So one of my invitations, and even a chapter in the book, it's called I'm a Number. Is important. Again, gentle kind of inquiry or compassionate curiosity or loving lingering, like a good alliteration, whatever it is that I'll notice that connection is my number one value. So when I'm feeling great, right? Like even this chance to connect here, I'm just overflowing with joy over connection, because we feel joy the closer we get to our truth, and our values are some of those ways that we know that. And I love connection. And so I noticed when I was, starting to experience intense chronic pain, I wasn't even feeling connected to myself because I didn't want to be in my body. I was, having trouble sitting. I couldn't stand. I couldn't exercise, which is like my med. And I started to notice that during work, in between clients, I would go on, social media, fine. Except I'd noticed that 25 minutes had passed and I had, learned how to make a souffle when I don't even really make souffles. And I was like, what just happened to me?
Yeah.
And so I know my numbing places.
Yeah.
I know my numbing statements. Even if I use the F word, fine. I'm probably not feeling something. I notice, so social media was a big number for me, but what I realized there is I was working with my coach through that, because I thought there's something weird, because every time I'm not doing something that really has to be intentional, I'm back on social media. And so what I noticed was I was numbing, trying to hardwire connection that wasn't authentic, right? So it wasn't feeding me. So I become a number. And I think I can also become a bit of a number, and maybe people don't think of this as numbing, is by being super disciplined. So if and again, you can see where Crossing Guard Girl can also, I am disciplined, which allows me to get a lot done, but I'll notice when I'm hard on myself, like a lot of shaming and shoulds, instead of just picking a routine and being able to, waver from it and, do something a little differently. Because then my opposite number is, Leona, no social media for you.
Yeah.
No
That's
chocolate, no nothing. And then I know, oh, honey, what's up? Let's just explore that. and just be with that. So, and for me, my way home is talking to somebody who loves me, but again, like journaling is a big piece. That's part of the book. The science of journaling is ridiculous, like, boosts immunity, lowers your blood pressure. And it really was part of my closet time, was like crying, journaling, and trying not to choose other behaviors that would not serve me in that time. So
Amazing.
it's really been I'm a normal human being. And even people are like, oh, you're not very cheery today. I was like, being a I call myself the joy girl. It doesn't mean we're cheery. It's just, how are we creating, number one, a foundation of, I describe joy as like having 5 components. Are we grounded? So are we using self-care, taking care of our own well-being? Are we generous with ourselves and others in thought and deed? And these are all, again, backed by science and positive psychology, being researched for like 40 years. Am I being genuine? Am I being true to myself? What are my values? Who am I? What matters to me? I think grace is a big part of, and what I define grace as is, what is this like kind of intangible pieces that allow us to be resilient, right? So I always say to myself, my kind of resilience or grace mantra is, I'll always have what I need. So that doesn't mean I'm always joyful, but I do trust that in whatever's I'm going through, and that doesn't mean that everybody lives. That doesn't mean that brain tumors don't grow. It doesn't mean that there's not still financial issues, but do I always have enough to get through? So really understanding our beliefs and our mindset and what bolsters our own resilience is really important. And then I talk about gratitude, and not just like, oh, we have to have a gratitude practice, but how are we changing our brains to be more optimistic? What are some really great, and even in the most stressful moment, not to be trite, but again, it can hack our brains off that lizard part to our strategic part. Gratitude does that, oddly. It's like a little cookie that goes, okay, we're going to switch, go to the cookie part. And so gratitude helps us to be present. And then it also changes our brains, but it's a lot of really great ways that we can use gratitude to become present, gratitude to reduce stress, gratitude can be a practice, gratitude can help us get grounded. So they all kind of mix together, but those are those kind of, I call it like the 5-finger joy plan. And you can just kind of pick, okay, what do I need now? Right. And not necessarily that you're going to get joy in return, but eventually you're going to start to notice that these things nurture. That's where we cultivate the crap, that nurture those opportunities to find our joy spots, which then help us to move on, get through.
Amazing. So you've alluded to this book a few times. You've mentioned this book that you've written, and I've seen that it's I can pre-order it.
You can.
When is it available?
So the book is called Finding Your Joy Spot, and helping you find joy in unexpected places. And it is available July 5th. Nice. I can send you a link. So if people want to get on the pre-launch list, and there'll be lots of goodies along the way, and no obligation to purchase. They do get the first couple chapters, so they get a little bit of an idea, a little taster, and some of those journaling prompts to even understand, okay, where do I even find joy? Because sometimes it's just, we forgot what it looked like. So we're like, oh, how yummy is that? So, so if that's something that people feel like they could use, or they know somebody that could use a little joy, I feel like somebody said, wow, it's perfectly timed with COVID. Nothing I ever do is really perfectly timed. It just happens to be some universal grace that's like, oh, we're all languishing. Yeah, we could use some joy. So
everybody could.
Everybody could. So
sorry, I was going to say, it sounds like such a solid book. I mean, you're right. Like when you say joy, I think, it sounds like it's going to be like,
Christmas
lights. I can
lights.
smell the roses. Yeah, okay. But it's so much deeper than that.
Yes.
As you're talking.
It starts out with, so it's built on the premise of PERMA, which is Martin Seligman, who is 40 years of studying positive psychology. It's the 5 components that really bolster. It used to be called happiness. Now it's called well-being. And so how do we experience positive emotions, engagement, healthy relationships, meaning, and accomplishment. And so each chapter is aligned with one of these. I am a huge science dork because I just think, oh, you can say anything, but if it doesn't make a difference, like who cares?
Yep.
So, and then it's part storytelling, mostly mine, because I cannot tell my clients, which they're super happy for, as you publish a book. Like, thank God. And then research-backed tools from all kinds of different research. John Gottman, like I said, Martin Seligman, Brene Brown, Teresa Wiseman, who is like the mother of empathy, self-compassion, Kristen Neff. So they're all peppered in there, but they're peppered in a way and packaged up that you're not like, oh, I hate science, I don't care. Enough that you go, okay, this is based on the truth. I might trust what Leona's saying. And then it's meant kind of as a self-reflection book. It's not meant to be like just read through in a day. You can, but it has 3 or 4 just self-reflection questions. So it's like coaching in a can. The whole plan is that you can integrate this. If people aren't journalers, it's fine. They can take one question, take it to work and go, wow, what is this? And so it starts with the very beginning. I make a joke about the Sound of Music, that song. And really, what are the stories that helped me, like, made us up? Like, that maybe those are some tough, gritty parts that we took on some parts. And so how do we, like we're talking here, kind of love that little part of us back to life? And then we look at, is there something you would tell yourself as a teenager? And so we start sort of like, I call it like the grit, the grind, and the glory. So the grit is those pieces of us that made us, those stories of when you were younger. And the grit is often like, what are those patterns we took on? Like I talk about being busy. I don't even like the word now. Like I would drop an F-bomb before I say busy about me. I say full because I'm like, I am in charge of how full my life is. So no. You're not going to be, I'm not going to be your horse and my life drives me. So what are those patterns that we have taken on, right? Do we have the space we need to even experience anything meaningful, joyful? What is it that we love doing? What are some of the skills that we have? And so we kind of unpack who we have become, what patterns have formed, what patterns we love, what we don't, how can we set boundaries, how can we have healthier relationship? And then it's more into who do we want to be? Now we know all these things. And then what do we want to take forward? What does legacy look like? What are some goals that would, blow our hair back? How do we set those joyfully so we don't have the whipping kids back in our, on our behind? And so again, just integrating things and then moving forward with purpose and meaning on our terms, not somebody else that says, oh, you need to do this. So really a process of self-discovery and integration. So you get to find your joy spots. I don't tell you what those look like.
Amazing.
But,
well, I've been in that place where my life was so chaotic and I'd lost myself in it that I couldn't remember what I liked to do.
Right. Me too. Me too.
And my clients are in the same boat. I say, well, what do you do? What fills you up? And I remember thinking this, I know I used to have fun.
Yeah, I know that F word.
But I can't recall for the life of me what I was doing when I was having it. Like I just...
No, exactly.
It was like a project. I had to say, okay, I'm going to try sewing and see if that's on my list.
I know. We think about pottery. And so in the book, I talk about, Elizabeth Gilbert talks about it in her book, Big Magic, and I love it. She just says, just notice where you're curious. So if you've had more than 2 thoughts about planting tomatoes, maybe buy a seed. Not saying you are going to be a professional tomato planter, but then that sparks more joy, which lights the way, your Reese's Pieces moment to go,
this is a little,
oh, you know what? I started planting tomatoes. And now I have no idea where it ends. I just love how weird the universe is, because it may have started with planting tomatoes. You bumped into somebody at Home Depot. They end up becoming your client or your lover. In my case, I'm married. Our daughters were best friends in high school, and now they're sisters. That's how we ended up being married. So you never know where the seeds get planted.
You really do never know.
Right? Oh, I'm curious about that school. Oh, the kids meet, and 7 years later, they're stepsisters. So We don't judge our curiosity. We just go for it, because that's what starts to spark more opportunities.
Amazing.
And we follow our little joy spots along the way. No judgment as to where that goes.
I love it. So the book is coming. I'm excited about it coming out. And what is there anything else that you want us to know about that's upcoming for you?
The book is coming out. And if ever there's somebody that's listening to this podcast and they're like, I can't wait for the book, or I don't want to read a book, but I could really use some more joy. I do all kinds of coaching, from leadership to corporate work to entrepreneurial coaching. But if in this case, somebody is just dying to know a little bit more joy, life has lost its luster, things are feeling dull or like Groundhog Day, I do offer a number of complimentary 20-minute sessions to just help people find joy. Yeah, I'll send you that link too, and you can post it. But I want nothing more than for people to experiencing life-changing joy. It's where they find their truth. It's where they find themselves, and it's what creates more magic in the world. I'm the Joy Spot on Instagram and Facebook. We'll put that in there. But yeah, I'm on brand for that, which is not the case for everything else I do. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
My pleasure. Friends, thanks for listening. And if you liked this episode, please be sure to click on the thumbs up below for YouTube and comment. What did you like most? And what do you want to hear more of? I'd love to hear from you. And in case you missed it, the website is maureentowns.com. Bye.